My name is Yesenia, and I'm so glad to be here. Um, Children working beside their parents build character. Early mornings in the fields teach discipline. Protecting the American farm means protecting a way of life, a cherished, wholesome piece of American culture. It's a compelling story. It's comforting. And if you listen to those who defend child labor and agriculture today, you'll hear it repeated again and again, as if the entire future of American farming depends on children learning the family business by performing the work my family did while the ones who supervised sat in their air-conditioned trucks, tractors, or rode around in rows on their ATVs and golf carts. In all my years working in tobacco, I never worked alongside a farmer's daughter or son. I never met the white, non-Hispanic children whose right to learn to farm supposedly requires the preservation of child labor exemptions. Those children aren't in the rows at 5 in the morning. They aren't the ones absorbing nicotine equivalent to smoking an entire pack of cigarettes through their skin or working inside a poultry or hog operation. The children in America's fields are immigrant children and children of color. So brown children, black children, poor children, children whose families are held hostage by systems that were never designed for them to move upward. So if we're going to talk about legacy, we need to be honest about which legacies are actually being protected. There is a legacy we say we are preserving, the nostalgic image of a small family farm. And then there's a legacy we're actually preserving, the one rooted in slavery, exploitation, and the belief that certain farm workers, including children, belong to those who profit from their labor. In our experience, emergency responders have told us that if a worker calls for help or if there's a hurricane evacuation order, they call the grower first, not the worker, not the family, because the unspoken assumption is that workers on the farm are part of the grower's property, part of the operation, part of the asset. This is normalized plantation logic, repackaged for the modern day. And growing up, I heard the same messages that every farm worker child hears. That because our skin color is darker, we can withstand the sun longer. That we don't need as much water. That drinking cold water will make us sick. That thirst is normal, exhaustion is normal, and the pain is normal. These aren't harmless myths. They are the everyday instructions for humans expected to work in conditions that are unimaginable to most people in this nation. When I talk about child labor in this country, I'm not reaching back through history books. I'm reaching back to the rows of tobacco where I and so many others grew up. At 14, I stood in fields that felt endless, wrapped in a trash bag I thought would keep me dry, never knowing it would trap the nicotine and pesticides against my skin. By noon, my head spun from dehydration, my stomach twisted from the chemicals absorbed through my skin. My hands were sticky with tar. This wasn't 1910. This wasn't a story from some distant past. This was Eastern North Carolina. I was like, and it's happening today, and it's going to happen again tomorrow. We find children in poultry barns. We find them in hog farms inhaling ammonia strong enough to choke an adult. We find them gently but quickly harvesting our mother's day flowers, harvesting the blueberries, kale and cabbage that show up washed and beautiful in grocery stores. People want to believe our experiences are accidents, gaps, oversights, cracks in the system, but these aren't cracks. It is the system, a system that relies on extreme poverty, a system that relies on families who can't afford a car even if they had the right to drive, parents who are so busy surviving by ensuring our food supply that there's no time to learn English, who don't understand the bureaucratic maze required to access healthcare or school services or wage protections. A system designed so that mobility is impossible, so that children's labor often becomes the only buffer between survival and collapse. We inherited an agricultural framework exempt from the farm labor standards, an exemption powerful enough that no advocacy campaign has ever defeated it. And because that exemption exists, children, mostly immigrants, mostly brown and black, mostly invisible, are still working today in conditions that routinely cause irreversible organ damage, heat strokes, and death. That's not a loophole. It's a caste system. A legacy not inherently noble, it's simply that we've repeated it long enough to stop questioning its sanity. Slavery is also part of that American farm legacy. So is racism, disenfranchisement, and the quiet comfort with which this country assigns hardship to certain communities while preserving opportunities for others. If we want to change the trajectory of the American story, we have to start by telling the truth about the systems we inherited. And then we must be bold enough to build the systems no one has yet imagined. That requires asking different questions, not how do we reduce violations, but how do we ensure no child labor is required for their family to eat? Not how do we expand the labor supply, but what would this country look like if every worker, including farm workers, had rights, protections, and dignity? Not how do we tweak the framework, but how do we redesign it so that no community is left invisible, unprotected, or without the dignity of healthy food, opportunity, and safety. That work requires more than policy expertise. It requires moral clarity. This is about justice. And justice means centering the people closest to the pain, not as stories to be told, but as architects of its solutions. There is another American legacy we need to acknowledge, the persistent message that children like me belong in fields, but not in the future. That we are perfect for harvesting this nation's food, but we're never meant to contribute to rooms where people are debating outcomes that shape our very lives. Locally, we know this much. You can't end child labor without replacing the income that child labor currently props up. Otherwise, you're not protecting us or collapsing our families. Before we can remove children from fields, we must replace the income that current systems have stolen from their families. Higher adult wages, stable winter income, mobility to train and reach other jobs, market premiums for child-free produce, and access to small farm enterprise development. These are few examples of the essential economic foundation that makes ending child labor possible. In this room, I'm imagining there are decades of dedication to this effort, people who work tirelessly to influence policy, shape supply chains, inform public imagination, and hold institutional power. Your presence here is not an accident, it's a signal, and that signal comes with responsibility. Every person here represents a part of the system we are trying to transform. The choices you make, such as the standards that are enforced, will determine whether the next generation of rural children of color spend their summers learning and laughing or standing in a tobacco field wearing a trash bag to keep chemicals off their skin. If we love food, we must love the people who produce it. If we care about children, we must care about the conditions they are growing and working in. And if we care about justice, then silence and nostalgia cannot carry us forward. Only courage can. We are all planting something, whether we mean to or not. The only question that matters now is what will your choices grow and who will inherit the world you help shape? The future I hope for will not arrive on its own. I understand my responsibility to help build it clearly, intentionally, and together. So the next generation of children doesn't have to survive what too many of us continue to endure. Thank you.